Welcome to Common Mansplaining, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome back. Welcome back. How's it going, Christian? How's it going?
Outstanding.
Fantastic. Welcome to Common Mansplaining, guys. If this is your first time here, welcome to the show. Please like, share, and subscribe. Do all the things that are like free and take like half a second, and we'll try to get this show off the ground. We're still hovering around like 12 and a half thousand subscribers, which is fantastic. Thank you so much. But we could always use more. So tell your friends about us, tell your family, and we're off. All right. Is America a Christian nation? That's a very interesting question to ponder. Hi, Vicky. How's it going? I knew this one would be right up your alley. So yeah, it's one of those wars that's being waged in America right now, right? And the American, particularly American atheist left, is particularly has a particularly egregious fight against what they will label as Christian nationalism. And the weird thing is, if you listen to them talk long enough, it's really not the Christianity part that's the problem to them, it's the nationalism part. But they lump it together because, of course, they try to make a common enemy of those two things, right? As some of you who watch the news are aware of, in recent times there was a very Anthony, how's it going? In recent times there was a trans shooting in Minnesota, which was a terrible tragedy. And as a response to this, of course, most tragedies, what a Christian will the first thing a Christian will think to say is, "Oh my God, I'm so sorry. I'm praying for you. I'm praying for the souls of the lost. I'm praying for the family that is continuing with that loss and that regret and that pain." It's just one of the first things that comes up that is our response, right? And but of course, this is something that Jen Psaki and Gavin Newsom found particularly upsetting, right? So they went on a rant. Like Jen Psaki went on this huge rant. And I'm going to quote her for you. She said, prayer is not freaking enough. Prayers do not end school shootings. Prayers do not make parents feel safe sending their kids to school. Prayer does not bring these kids back. Enough with the thoughts and prayers. That was her quote. And I don't even want to go into
how many. When it was a religious Christian institution attacked during worship. Right.
I mean, I don't even know where to start with how many different ways this is wrong. Like, enough with the thoughts and so we're not even allowed to have thoughts anymore. Like, what? Right. Right. It never, the prayers, first of all, prayers do make parents feel safer, right? That's, something we'll go into a little bit later is what the studies show, what the effectiveness of prayer. But, and then, of course, okay, Carolyn Levitt, got on and said that this was incredibly disrespectful, and it was. It was very insensitive to the parents that were grieving. It was very insensitive to the families that had experienced this loss. And then Newsom responded to that, saying they were literally praying when they got shot, as if to say, obviously, prayer didn't help.
The prayers are impotent, yeah.
Right. And I'm like, first of all, it's not like the kids were at mass thinking, "Oh dear God, please don't send a trans shooter to," like, what in the world? Like, you couldn't be more tone deaf. Like, I cannot. No one was praying not to be shot. They were praying because they were in the middle of a rich. It's not.
That's exactly that. That's when they talk about the terrorists win. That's exactly what the terrorists want us to think. Right? He wanted people to give up faith, to feel like faith had no answers, that there was no strength in worshiping Christ. Right? Dark stuff. And that's immediately the message that the left gets, because it doesn't fit their narrative, what the agenda that they want to push.
Right. And so, but it does bring up the larger question, is America a Christian nation? Do prayers and thoughts still have power? And the first question I would ask is, why does it have to be like one or the other? Like, they say this like prayer is the only thing that we do, right? Like we don't also, for example, give to charity to help those families. Like, these families all have like GoFundMe's, I guarantee it. They all have people that are helping out, that are assisting them. When I think, like if I'm in a terrible tragedy or in a terrible situation, I don't think, let me just pray and do nothing else. No, I add prayer to the the many things that I will do to help combat that
Right.
terrible
I mean,
tragedy.
look. So many people want to act out and support, but what we're bound by in our modern world is we need to act appropriately, right? And so there's only so many things that somebody appropriately can do from North Carolina or even in the local community, um, and to show support. So we're looking for that. Part of the issue, right? They want to make this about politics, and when it comes down to, and this is where, right, us being a Christian nation, why atheists are upset, because we're a democracy. People, right? The majority of people, large numbers that vote, who happen to be Christian, and their Christian values highly motivate their worldview. I mean, I see the world through my Christian faith, and strongly motivates and influences my evaluation of political platforms, political candidates, um, and while I'm not directed to by my denomination how to vote, uh, I'm informed by my worldview and see things, right. And a lot of Americans have that same thing and tend to vote in ways that support the Christian sort of view of the world, right? And obviously, Satanists who have a different view, or atheists or whatever, are going to be drowned out when it comes to a democracy, right? So we're going to govern us according to a Christian value or a secular value, you're going to be outvoted. And right, and unless you make your point, and you're going to have to make your point of persuasion. Now, this is the thing of minorities. Minorities are protected to some degree here in America, right? So you do have that freedom of religion, but they try to use the courts to change things when they can't win majorities, when they can't use, right? And that's when people say, whoa, 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 And if this is how you really want to change policy, make arguments, convince people, see that this is for their benefit. Like everybody has to do. Don't just rally against people's worldview and morals differ from yours, and so you're losing elections.
Right. Yeah, right. And so it's kind of interesting you brought that up. It's like, right, in a situation where one group is espousing to be so secular, it behooves us to ask the question why. Like, why are they really, what's behind this? What's motivating this? And Christian hit the nail right on the head. It's power, right? They're worried that the Christian worldview is going to remove power from their side, right? For some reason. And you might ask yourself, like, why are they on the side against the Christian worldview? And why does it present a problem for power if people vote against them in that situation? Like, there are a lot of single issue voters in the world, and a lot of them are for Christian reasons. Like, for example, both of my brothers are diehard pro-lifers, for example, and it's because of their religious motivation, because their religious framework. Right, both my brothers are Catholic. They will not vote for someone who is in favor of killing a bunch of babies in their mind, right? And of course, I put in the blunt terms they would use. I mean, you could be more nuanced about it, maybe, but like, they just won't. It doesn't matter who that person is. They wouldn't vote for a Republican with that view. They wouldn't vote for a Democrat with that view. It doesn't matter who they are. And so, on the other side of that equation, imagine if every Christian that followed that tenet, and there's a lot of, Christians, and especially I think Catholics still make up the largest single Christian subgroup in America. Like, imagine if that just off the bat eliminated an entire half of the political, options to them. You'd be in trouble if you're going against a group of like 40-50% who automatically can't vote for you. So you have to try to fight against
plenty of Christians, even in my faith, plenty of Christians vote, both sides vote for the left and for the right. The right is maybe a little more open about it, but the left doesn't. They don't want to, right? The politics. They don't want to aggravate or offend their Christian voters, but they definitely are in favor of a more secular, secularization of our country, and feel that favors their power base, frankly, longer
Yeah.
term, the faster we secularize, because they looked at Europe. As Europe has become more secular, they saw a
Yeah.
rise in the power of the left. We're seeing a reverse in that. Like, just because there's a momentary rise in the power of the left doesn't mean it's irreversible. But
Right.
you still have a very secular Europe now going back to the right. And
Right.
that's interesting. And so they're trying to be like, before that was, it's just Christians, people clinging to their Bible, like Obama dismissively said years ago. Now they have to see like, secularists can come back to the right too. But definitely the right, being for more traditional or more common sense things, and culture, Christian culture has been usually more at home on the right of the political spectrum generally.
Yeah, so to Rocky's point, yeah, in the Catholic question, technically it's really against the religion to support the Democratic Party based on abortion and the LGBTQIPA2A plus plus. Yeah, I mean, yeah, you're absolutely right, and I think it's interesting that I have if you were to like poll Catholics, they're largely actually Democrats, probably because of like the all the non-pro-life social stances. Like they're very into, for example, it is pro-charity.
Hispanic.
Right. There's a very large Hispanic population, but there's also like, there are aspects of the Christian religion which, if you don't pay very, very close attention, might seem more Democrat in nature, right? For example, like the concept of giving charity, while it's supposed to be a very personal thing and a very local thing, if you like read the Bible, Jesus didn't say, no, you should give money to Caesar, who will then distribute it to someone else. Jesus said, no, you should give to charity, right? But the theory of charity, it sounds like that's a very like socialistic concept, right? That everybody should share wealth, right? And so it's very easy to confuse those things. A lot of people in the Catholic faith apparently have done that, have confused that it should be something where the concept that we should give charity means that we should make everybody do it, from the government down. And it's kind of a weird situation. But yeah, like I've always asked them, like my friends that are Catholic and Democrat, I'm like, how do you square this with, with being pro-life? How is that possible? But they don't ever have a really good answer. They give me a runaround or a kind of a cop out.
Well, yeah. Well, so different people see the world through their faith differently too, right?
Right.
And part of the thing, and there's cognitive. Again, no platform or candidate's going to be perfect. Everybody's going to have to make concessions, right? I'm no candidate from short of Mitt Romney. You shared my faith and worldview,
Yeah.
right? And so, there's times where you're gonna have to support somebody because they're better than the alternative. They're more in line. They're closer to you. Like we have with two political parties, we get compromised within those parties,
Right.
and compromise. And so, people see those compromises, and that's how you can get Christians, right, and my faith who feel like the Democrats better represent their idea of the line for appropriate use of government, and vice versa. Right. So, I mean, we can say there can be good people on both sides, to use a weighted phrase there. Yes,
fine people on both sides, absolutely.
Fine people on both sides.
So so the question then is America actually Christian, right? So one thing to note, of course, would be our Constitution, as in lowercase c Constitution, right? Like, so we're currently, I believe, roughly 62 to 65% of Americans identify as some kind of Christian religion, some sort of Christian faith. Now, that doesn't mean that that the rest are not sympathetic to Christian viewpoints. It used to be much higher. It, like when we were founded, it was almost 98% Christian, which is an outrageously high number. Now, one if we were to say, Christian, when people say, America is a Christian nation, a lot of times what they're saying is that it was founded on Judeo-Christian principles, right? That the largest portion of America at that time was Christian. I think there's a strong case to be made to say that many of the founding fathers were basically using all of the moral codes from the Bible and basically using them in our code in America. And we're going to go into some of that today. Now, the percentage.
Largely the founders, the founding of the union, comparatively to regimes at the time, was radically secular.
Oh yeah, yeah,
right?
yeah. Well,
Because of like, this is the state religion, the fourth state religion that countries in Europe were either Protestant or they were Catholic or something like that. Ours was trying to allow a framework where people could live in both. It was generally more favorable to Protestants, as that was the large population at the time. But and they basically the president had to be Protestant for a long time, right? They didn't really trust Catholics, but
until JFK.
But they still felt like the faith was important, but they didn't want to put their thumb on the scale for any particular faith, as was clearly being done by the monarchies in Europe at the time.
Right. Yeah. And yeah. Right. Compared to like I said, I think it was 98%. The colonists were 98% Christian. The founding fathers, I think it was closer to like 85%, and the others were what most people would call like a philosophical deist. They still believed in God, right? They still believed in a creator, but they wouldn't necessarily square well with any
the denomination,
right? Like a perfect denomination, right? So now of recent days, our percentage has fallen, of course, over time from 98% down to 80 to 70 to 65 now percent, and it's actually kind of stabilized at 65%. For the most part, what the assumption is that the actual like American citizenry is still going down slightly, but that the immigration of Hispanics largely, who are overwhelmingly Catholic, is kind of like stagnating the drop. So it's interesting what's happening to the demographics of Christianity. Now, that being said, if you were to call America any religion, obviously Christian is the only one that has a stake, right? We're obviously not Muslim. We're obviously not Jewish. We're obviously not Buddhist or Hindu. If it's anything other than just secular, it would have to be Christian, because of course the largest percentage of the population is Christian. The moral code is based on Christians. A lot of the customs are based on Christianity, like the history, right? The holidays,
the swear words. I mean, yeah, and our culture coming from Great Britain, which was a Christian nation, and this is really Western society. To go back, like, began with the Greeks, right?
Yeah.
And but really the bastion, the holder of it after the fall of the Roman Empire, really was Great Britain. That was where Western society, they were the keepers of that. They were the apogee of that, and the spreaders of it around the world, right? Bringing it to America. Now, but the influence of Christianity, right? So people can say that a culture is just based on Greek philosophy or moral codes or secular Greek. But if you go back and actually study the ancient Greeks, right, where the philosophers, where Western, sort of thought and ideas began, the democracy, is very foreign to us, right? They still, slavery is okay. The Spartans, if they felt like a baby was not live up to their standards, would just throw a live born baby into a ravine, right? Things that seem really, really, really foreign to us, right? And that really the change to that sort of harsh Western society has been Christianity. Christianity, one that valued human life, right? The first one, even in the 3rd century, St. Basil, right, wished that slavery would end, didn't know that it was possible or that he would see it in his lifetime. But that became, just an entrenched sort of Christian doctrine. No other culture in the world even tried to or hope for an end of slavery, right? Orphanages didn't exist anywhere else except the Christians, right? Because human life didn't have the value. Other Eastern religions said, well, if that baby starves to death, and it'll just be reborn, reincarnated, right? So they didn't see things, they didn't see the tragedy or the value of life. So, but gradually, and Tom Holland in his book Dominion talks about this, how
Mm.
Slowly, the Roman Empire started developing it, and then every country, as they encountered it, was changed and shaped by Christianity and how it changed what we would say our modern academics are based on it. The idea that you can choose your own religion, right? Freedom of religion is a deeply Christian concept, right? Not to have it dictated to you by the state or by those around you. That you can have a freedom of conscience, these types of things are all not just Greek ideas, but deeply Christian ones.
It's all Greek to me. No, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. I would never throw a baby in a ravine, but my ex-wife may. No, I'm kidding. Uh, but yeah, absolutely. So right, that's the history of it. And even in America, we have a storied tradition of so much Christian influence. I mean, like, one of the classic things you'll hear from the opposite side, the side that wants to claim that America is wholly secular and that it's not a Christian nation, you'll hear quotes like, "Oh, God's not mentioned in the Constitution," things like that. Right? Which ironically, God is actually in the Constitution. It's in the date. It says in the year of our Lord, but that's just quibbling. But like, I mean, sure, maybe it isn't in the Constitution
Yeah,
mentioned
but in
as
the
a.
papers, in the Federalist Papers and stuff like
It's
that,
in
like
it's
it
in the
was.
Federalist Papers, it's in the Declaration of Independence, it's in the national anthem, it's in our national motto, it's in our oath of Pledge of Allegiance, our oath of offices, it's in our many of our state constitutions, it's in, like, you can go on, it's on our money, it's in our, we have national holidays of like Christmas, Easter, things like that. Like, I could go on and give you all of the different individual references, but the Declaration is like the big one to me, right? This is the one that sets the tone. And while it may not have had any like legal code force in America, it definitely had legal force in that it established our nation. It was the first founding document, and
Well,
it
the
indicates,
reason why we exist, it's the like why we even the
yes,
essential why we need to not just be a colony, why we need to exist as a new country.
right, and it details basically the foundation for all of our morality here in America and all of our legal code to follow. Right, it gives us unalienable rights endowed to us by our Creator of life, liberty, and pursuit of happiness. Right, and
Also, that King George was a jerk. Yes.
yeah, right. Also that. Right. So if you start there, right, inalienable rights is just so huge. And you've probably heard me rail about this on this channel before, but unalienable rights, like, people don't understand how much weight that carries in America, right? Because if without our Creator giving us these rights, a right doesn't actually have any moral force, right? It's just like people say, that's my right. I have the right to health care. I have the right to, bodily autonomy, or I have this right, or I have that right. They say the word right all the time. They throw it around like a frisbee. But the truth is, without it being a unalienable right endowed by the Creator, all that word means is this is a preference that I hope my society backs with force. That's all it means, right? It's like just a subjective preference that I hope is shared. And that if it's not, then it's not a right? Like, if you
Yeah.
you could say things like that's my right all day long, but if the government doesn't come behind with guns and say, yeah, we're going to protect this right, then
Yes.
all it is just you yelling in town square and nobody else cares, right? Like, you could say, I have
yeah, and
yeah, go ahead.
especially that these are rights from the government, that the government can't infringe upon this. Yeah,
Right.
the government, and the government
Yeah.
will
Right.
essentially protect you when if other citizens were to try to impinge upon that as
Yes.
well, to some
And
degree.
and the right, the reason that these are important is because they didn't come from the government. The reason that the government is bound to protect them is because the government didn't give them to you. It was already there, right?
Yes.
And that's people don't understand how deeply that is interwoven into our legal code. Literally every single law we have protects in some way, even if it's convoluted and indirect, because the law can do that. It protects in some way someone's life, someone's liberty, or someone's pursuit of happiness. More often it's property, because it's just more easily to define. But that's the only thing that the law is set up to do. Right? That's it. And to And the only other thing is to, protect contracts, but agreements between two people, right? Which sometimes doesn't necessarily coincide with pursuit of happiness, but often it does. Almost always it does.
All right. So what about fairness, Eddie?
What about
Doesn't the government need to create fairness? If they see unfairness, isn't that the government's role to jump in and see unfairness? I mean, Christianity is against unfairness, right?
Well, so and again, in the Declaration of Independence, it says all men are created equal, right?
Yeah.
But the government's job is only to protect fairness from the government, right? In the eyes of the government, in the eyes of the law, in the eyes of the government. It's not supposed to make two people playing a game of Monopoly finish at the exact same time with the exact same money. It's not supposed to make two people running a leg race finish at the exact same time, right? That's not what the government's job is. The government's job is only to make sure that two people follow the exact same laws and are treated the exact same way by laws. So that's the fairness it has to protect. Yes. Good question.
So yeah, people being in the lower classes, right, coming from the English class system, right,
Yes.
definitely treated differently from people in the upper classes. That's something that legally, like the United States was not going to tolerate, and I think it's a large degree why we don't see British class systems here, even though we have stratifications based on wealth.
Right. And yeah, it's funny you mentioned that because a friend of mine, I have I'm in a chat group that's very largely Indian, and they have a caste system over there, and it's like almost a foreign concept, and they will repeatedly say that America has the same system. I'm like, no, and the key difference is the legal treatment, right? Like we have people that have different access to agency, sure. Some people can do things that I will never be able to do, right? With their money, with their power, but when it comes to the law, they're effectively treated the same. Now, of course, in a sense, they're able to protect themselves slightly better because they can hire better lawyers and better legal teams. But that is part of the
well, yeah, the government has the ability to harass you with bringing legal cases against you when you're a common man because our resources can be depleted in those defenses, right? Though, if you win, you can sue for costs and things sometimes. But it is a form of harassment, right? But yes, the wealthy can protect themselves because they can afford that and not be bothered by it, kind of slough it off. And that's frankly why, not to derail the point, why I feel like a lot of traction hasn't been gotten on with the Epstein list is because I feel like with Epstein dead, if he was alive, it would be one thing. To corroborate a lot of the information, you'd be going after people that would have really, really good lawyers, would have really, really expensive or lengthy court proceedings, and you couldn't necessarily count on them to just plead out. So, which is when you bring the whole bearance of the government in the criminal trial. A lot of times, the common man just pleads out, right? Like well over 90% of cases end with a guilty plea, right? When because the common man just can't muster a good defense, and can't afford one or whatever. When they bring to bear the strength, right? So the government can't bully us. That's why we need these protections against them. But yes, there are the elites. Financial power does give you power, a little more freedom from the government. Let's acknowledge that.
Absolutely. So yeah, one of the reasons that people say this is a Christian nation too is the founding of it was overwhelmingly Christian. Obviously, the history that of a lot of people came to America seeking religious freedom, right? Seeking the freedom. But when they say religious freedom, and one of the things that's brought up more often than anything else is the First Amendment with the Establishment Clause. The freedom of religion that they sought was freedom to practice different denominations of Christianity. Like, for the most part, it was essentially that. And, it's funny that everybody brings up that Establishment Clause as like an argument against the fact that American is a Christian nation. One of the interesting things to note is that I'm not even sure I'm not even sure, like as a textualist, I would read that and say, sure, yeah, that's exactly what it means. It means that we, have to be completely neutral as a government. But as an originalist, I'm not even sure that was what was meant. I think maybe at the time what they meant was freedom to practice different Christianities. It may have in fact been that. I don't know. And
Right. Well,
because
yeah.
of the deist,
I mean, yeah, they didn't want secular wars like they'd seen in Europe,
right,
right? Or the government creating a state religion, but they knew that having religion was essential to the culture. They couldn't,
right,
they just didn't want to say, all right, Puritans get a little bit more love than Quakers or whatever. And part of the thing too, right? The frontiersmen, people went out to the woods. A lot of them would disconnect. They wouldn't be part of any type of secular. They couldn't participate in congregations. They would just sort of be like generically deists, right? Would know that there
right,
was God there, but especially if they couldn't read or something, these frontiersmen, which is why when you'd have, by the time of the Civil War, bringing a lot of these people in, a lot of them, that was the first time a lot of them got the chance to join denominations, be preached to, right? Bringing people out of the hills or out of the country where there weren't organizations. Now, obviously, the cities or the colonies, the well-established parts had that, but it
right.
was always, there were always unchurched people, and you were allowed to be unchurched. This is something in the old world. If you didn't go to church or were, just sort of lapsed, like you could be fined or thrown in jail or things like that too. Like the state religion was so much like you have to abide by, such things the church can impose you for breaking church laws, becoming less active in your church, right? Which is right now, right? If you opt not to participate, the government has no say in that
Yeah.
at all.
Yes, very. Yeah, yeah. I mean, yeah. Even at the time when the Constitution mandated no Congress that Congress couldn't implement a particular religion or national religion, there were still state-based religions. In fact, several of
Yeah.
the states like had individual. Some of them still do, by the way. Like Tennessee, I think, for example. Where is it? Hold on, I think I wrote it down. Um, yeah, Article 9, Section 1 of the Tennessee Constitution says it is the duty of all men to worship God Almighty. I mean, there's still remnants of that historical language in like almost every state. Not everyone, but some of them have gone like and systematically purged it, but very few. Most states like literally have at least some reference to God, some reference to like Christianity and the oath of offices or things like that. Like it's in there. It's basically
Yeah.
it's so
That's
deeply
very
interwoven.
Masonic. The Masons believed you had to believe in God, but were agnostic about, but believe participate in any denomination you want as long as you believe in God. Right. That's why I know a lot of the founding fathers were Masons too. So sort of part of that ideal was, yes, everybody should believe in God, but we can have peace between denominations.
So who is it? Let's see.
Annie,
Priyanashu Panwar said that he's talking about something tangential, but it's he said that
about
Trump
India.
said something about a diplomatic relationship. I'm not sure which quote you're referring to, so maybe be more clear, more maybe give me the whole quote or something that you want to talk about. I don't know. In any case,
But
yeah,
what we
so
allow, but having a Christian framework. So essentially, our culture and our Christian, what we're arguing, the common sense, is comes from Western siding with Christianity, mostly Protestant in culture, even though the membership now is mostly Catholic,
yep,
right? But the culture is still more Protestant, um, and egalitarian. So we can take in, right, Hindus, Buddhists, Islam, Sikhs, people, all kinds of faith all over the world. And for the most part, if they want to live peacefully, they can live peacefully. They can share their ideas. You can choose to accept them or reject them, right? In a spirit of peace. Nobody's holding a knife to your throat. The state can't threaten you with loss of property or throwing you in jail or anything like that for any choice you make when it comes to religion. And that's very different from what existed at the time in the world, and certainly what exists in parts of the world still. Right.
yep, yeah, absolutely. So, Priya and Ashu, you're talking about tariffs and stuff. I recommend you go check out our video on tariffs. It was actually a good one. But yeah, me personally, I'm not about tariffs. Christian is a little bit more forgiving, but in any case,
I see tariffs as a good negotiating tool. But yeah, read our finger on that, and we'll see.
yeah, absolutely, absolutely. So, yeah, Walter. Now, Walter says that America is secular. Now, here's my question to anyone who makes the claim that America is a secular nation. If you had to pick, like between secular nation and Christian nation, like which one would you pick? Because I mean, we obviously have a greater number of people that's Christian. We have, a history that's Christian. We have so many customs and traditions that are Christian. Our legal code is built on Christian foundations. I mean, I'm not opposed as to like the secular argument, but I just want to know where they get their weight from. Like, what exactly is it about America that says, "Wow, this is really a secular nation," other than its recent movement towards secularity?
Well, just the freedom to be unchurched, or to
Right.
to people. You can have a lot of sort of Christmas and Easter Christians, right? Which when I think of the Muslim world, right, there were two Muslim nations that I thought of that were secular Muslim nations, right?
Okay.
Right, they were much more like aligned with the West and Western values, but they still had a cultural basis in Islam. But we're kind of just like we celebrate the holidays a little bit, but they weren't. That was Turkey and Iran, right? We're
Right.
very sort of like secular Islamic. Now, Iran then had a revolution, and the militant Islamics took over, right? And secular Islamics continue to be in control in Turkey, but that country would like to secularize more. They would like to move away from militant Islam and more towards, let's just let good ideas, right? Sort of Western philosophy, Western culture be dominant, even though, or be the governing factor for that, right? The Constantinople, that was the heart of the Roman Empire. So they have ties, deep ties to Western culture. They would like to be more secularized away from what we would call
Right.
militant Islam.
And that's the key, I think, that's going on in American secularity too. It's not that we are secular; it's that they wish we were, that they want to be, and that's, I think, what the real argument is. Which I've got no problem with somebody saying that, but I wish they would be more honest about that being the argument. The argument that we actually are secular has much less weight than the argument "I want to be." Right? Like that's a completely different claim.
Yes. Sociologists definitely know that America is far less secular than Europe. There's far more religiosity, and not just people just identifying as religious, but religious activity. Now, the one thing they did notice that COVID did a lot to weaken that religious activity for a while. People couldn't go to church, right?
Yeah.
Things like that. And so, when they measured secular sort of things, there was this big jump, and it looked like America was becoming dramatically more secular. Now the farther we get away from COVID, there are people that are going back to church that are finding, hey, being secular didn't have the answers I was looking for, the meaning. Maybe, and so I would expect in 10 years will be about what we've been without COVID. But COVID did give us that temporary spike in measurable sort of moving away from church.
Moving towards secular practices, even if not secular actual faith. Right. So one of the things too that I think COVID did, and I hope that it creates a sort of rebound too, which it showed us how bad things get when we are in a slightly less religious practice, right? Like when we're like not constantly engaging in faith. I think it shows us that these are some of the bad results, right? There's a whole bunch of results that I want to discuss that whether or not we are Christian is a good question still, but whether or not we ought to be is a different sort of claim. And I wanted to go over some of the scientific studies that have demonstrated the value of religion. And I think you kind of hit the nail on the head when you said COVID kind of showed us what it was like, to be less in practice with religion. there are so many advantages to being religious, especially inclined with the Christian religion, right? And these are all straight from, just so like for the secularists who don't listen to like think moral arguments or philosophical arguments, or are just looking for scientific arguments, this is straight out of scientific journals, right? Okay. There are lower rates of depression and anxiety. There's higher mental resilience to like setbacks in life, and there's lower suicidality and suicide rates, like lower self-harm rates, and that's from the Handbook of Religion and Health from 2012. There are bigger physical life benefits. There's like longer life expectancy among those who actively practice religion. There's lower blood pressure, less heart disease, and that's from PAL, the American Journal of Epidemiology. There are social and community benefits. There's greater giving to charity. There's stronger social networks, less crime in communities that actively practice religion, and that's from Putnam and Campbell, the American Grace. I mean, like this goes on and on too. There's psychological benefits, there are moral development benefits, there's social networking benefits. I could list like 35 things that have all been scientifically measured through rigorous study, peer-reviewed study that demonstrate the value of religion. It always strikes me as odd that, like the atheistic group will say how harmful religion is and how it's terrible, needs to be, ripped up, root and stem. And yet science seems to show the exact opposite.
Well, yeah, when we come together to live in groups and societies, right? And this is forming a republic, forming governments, as individuals, having a faith is a positive. It's a binding, cohesive agent, and it helps us see the humanity in other people. Right? We don't immediately, we want to see beyond hate. Now there was a story. I think they should make it a movie, but it was a book I read, and there's some YouTubes about it, about how German POWs were taken in North Africa when the war first started. Right, we took about 200,000 German soldiers captive, and when the war was going to be a long time, so we shipped them back to America. Right,
okay.
And how they had been propagandized to view America, and how experience in America shattered those expectations.
Yeah.
And part of the thing they study, they allowed these people freedoms. They put them in trains that sent them to their prison camps that were nicer than any train. They weren't just cattle cars; they were Pullman cars with air conditioning and,
right.
and seats. And they got to prison camps in Oklahoma or different places that were nicer than where they lived, fully electric, everything like that. But it was how they were treated. Right, they were being given the chance, and it was freely to be taught about institutions, but so that they could go back to Germany and help rebuild post-war Germany. They were taught about the Marshall Plan even before it was made public, things like this. And how they tracked the Germans, they let them publish their own newspapers in these prints. And at first, all the things were about how Germany was going to win the war eventually, and they would be free and all this stuff. And gradually, as they experience in America, that all changed. And it was like, how can we, use democracy to build a better, stronger post-war Germany, things like this. And they saw that America wasn't treating them with hate, and it was this culture of Christianity, and they were going out there, and they saw our wealth, and especially the electrification of farms and rural communities was something that blew their minds. But that our plan was not to rule Germany, right? We wanted Germany to just pick itself back up, and we just wanted them to live in peace, and we're freely sharing ideas with them, technology, research that was ahead of German research, like in agriculture, medicine, things like that. They had penicillin. They would give penicillin to prisoners who had even minor, infections.
Right.
When that was like for the elite, in Germany type of thing. and that sort of value that we valued human life, right, was hugely influential in why they went back. And Germany didn't have a violent insurgency against us, and that they were tied to the West as these people, and they saw that this was like Christianity essentially practiced properly and not demonized as it had been in their sort of propaganda, and as they've been said, everything they've been told about America was a lie.
Yeah, right.
And
Yeah,
right,
of course.
and part of that, so they went back, and the West Germany, right? Germans are still pretty secular, but more of them that experienced America were more likely to have faith and be Christian.
So yeah, let's see. Walter said he was talking about who is he talking about? Talarco. Yeah. So Representative Talarco discusses the unchristian practice of Christian nationalism. So this is part of the war, right? That we mentioned in the beginning. The war is against what's labeled as Christian nationalism, but in reality, the nationalism is doing like 9/10 of the work there in that conjunction. Really, it's not even nationalism that people actually have a problem with. It's ultra nationalism, right? And the difference I would describe, and of course this is kind of a subjective definition, but the difference I would describe between the two is nationalism puts your country first. Ultranationalism puts your country exclusively, right? So like that's why a lot of times you'll hear the MAGA chant is America first, not America only, is to differentiate themselves from ultranationalism, right? And so I can definitely see like someone taking nationalism to the extent where they are so exclusionary that they are again starting to become unchristian, and that's definitely not what we espouse here on this channel, right? We think that we should put the government should always put the needs of its citizenry first, but that doesn't mean that doing so is to neglect everyone else. A lot of times incorporating other nations in cooperation is part of what puts our citizenry first, and sometimes not, right? Like sometimes there are times where globalists will hope to put the cooperation of other nations above the needs of the citizenry, and that's what we want to worry about. That's what we're concerned about. That's what we don't want to have happen.
Yeah,
so
that's what the common man, and here, right, we want to care about not just elites, but the common man. So it's not just what the rulers think or idealizing some sort of ideal structure or whatever, right? The common man's life is made worse,
right,
right?
right,
And alternatively blessed. And these are the things that the common man's life has value. Right? The common man's decision to follow their faith or to abandon their faith is theirs alone, and needs to be that decision, that choice needs to be sacred as far as the government is concerned.
Right. As a matter of fact, it's funny you said that because that's I would say that the strongest argument for secularity in America, the strongest argument is that that we do have to have the freedom to choose God or to not choose him, right? Like, and I think that's kind of implicit in there is the ability to not choose God is necessary for the ability to choose God, right? Which I would also argue is part of what makes us a more Christian nation, because that choice is very deeply Christian, right? It's just part of implied.
It's the application of it, the thing that you're not forced, but we feel like this would be a good thing for you. We want you to know about it, learn about it, but at the end of the day, you must choose for yourself, and we'll respect your decision.
Now, one thing, let's see, what did N1 AFE says, quote, and this is a very common one that I hear among atheists too. He says, there's absolutely no evidence for the existence of God. This is a classic one that I hear all the time. It's almost like such a common phrase that it's become a slogan, and almost so much so that I don't think people actually listen to the words and try to like parse it out. I bet if I like probed deeply, nobody would ever have anything like a layer down from that, right? It's just like there's no evidence. Well, I want to make sure that everyone understands what evidence is, right? And what kind of evidence is presented, for example, in court, right? We hear eyewitness testimonies all the time in court as evidence. Now, you would never take one person's testimony as proof of an event, or even two or three people's, especially if the event is important, right? Like, for example, a capital murder case, as I understand it, and correct me if I'm not wrong, legal scholars, requires what they call 9 points of evidence, right? You have to have more than just, a couple of people being witnesses. You also usually have to have the murder weapon. You have to have the body. You have the lots of different things, right? For you to just have enough evidence to prove that a person is guilty of murder. But just because you may not have all of those different pieces and you may not have proof beyond what we call a reasonable doubt, doesn't mean that an individual eyewitness doesn't count as evidence. Now, the Bible, for example, presents many, many, many eyewitnesses, like a lot of them, for a lot of different aspects of the Christian claim. Right? There's eyewitnesses that are witnesses of character. There are eyewitnesses that are witnesses of the historical context and the timeline. There are eyewitnesses that witness, individual events. Again, I don't know that I would call any single one of these testimonies strong evidence. I certainly wouldn't call it proof, which is why faith is necessary in the first place. But it's definitely evidence. Like 100%, it qualifies as evidence. What a lot of people will then immediately after, like the common rebuttal, another slogan, by the way, is no, it's not evidence. They're just more claims, more of the same claim restated. That's not how evidence works either. The claim in a situation is a philosophical adjacent and separate situation, right? So the claim would be maybe, for example, God exists, right? Or in a murder case, the claim would be this person killed this person, right? But that's a philosophical statement, an assertion. And then the testimony, even if they just say the same thing as the claim, still qualify as evidence. They are not simply restatements of the claim, they are evidence bolstering that claim. And I know that may seem like that isn't to say that, any one of those pieces of testimony is supposed to convince you. It may not be convincing evidence, or it may convince some people and not others, but it's 100%
yes.
evidence.
I know from my experience that God lives, that He has a plan for me, that He loves me, and that Christ is real and is capable of forgiving my sins. I can't transpose my experience onto other people,
Right.
right? But I will say that it is an adulterous generation that will only believe something if they receive a sign. Right?
Yeah. That's a good point.
That is somebody, right? When you ask, like, I'm only going to believe if I see a sign, acting by faith is the greater blessing. And that's really our whole test in life, is to see if we can act by faith. It's really easy. Yeah. If we see a sign, or if we receive knowledge, that's not faith and that's not growth. And God, and that you wouldn't be free of that if God were to show Himself to you, right?
Right.
You need to think about it, and then you need to have the personal faith to act and follow that faith. And God gives you the freedom to do that. And so, yeah, you can hear arguments on both sides, and then you get to choose for yourself. Obviously, Nate right now is on the side of he needs a sign before he'll believe.
Sure.
I would say, Nate, the Bible is evidence, but also the Book of Mormon is evidence. It was a complete other continent where Christ appeared. And so it wasn't just one nation, it was two nations. And this is the two witnesses that God and Jesus Christ is the God of the whole world and the universe. So read the Book of Mormon, and then I think you'll be good.
So of course, I had a feeling this might devolve into, does God exist debate, and I think we should do one of those. Like, definitely, we should do a debate that's just centered around, God's existence. But that being said, this is another classic one that King Crazy Cyborg says. The Bible went unwritten for years, has undergone many interpretations and translations. What makes you believe that it exists when humans were the ones who had to track, remember, and write it? Well, I mean, even if all that's the case, it would still, the Bible itself, we know, is still an existent anthology, right? Like, Doesn't take any faith to believe that. I have a copy right over there in the room next to me. Whether it is, a compilation of the things that that are claimed about it or not is a different question. But one of the other things too that I hear very commonly is that it right there, that first statement, that it went unwritten for years. So it's important to note that the claim that it went unwritten for years is an effectively unproven claim. A better way of stating that, a more precise way of stating that, is that we have insufficient reason to believe that it was written before those years had transpired. But in reality, one of the weird like paradoxes is that in the scholarship of the Bible, they often claim that there was this gap in time before it was written, and they claim that this gap took place because the Jewish temple is described, the destruction of the Jewish temple is described in many of the earliest books in the Bible. Well, the funny thing is that if the Bible is true, and this supernatural ability to see events before they take place is in reality, then that wouldn't have any effect on the timeline. It could be predicted before, it could be predicted afterwards. Furthermore, even without any supernatural ability to predict the destruction of the Jewish temple, I think you could predict it naturally. Like, I think even a normally cognizant person with just good strategic or tactical knowledge and understanding of the surrounding empires, it doesn't take a genius to know that the empires are going to be beset, and that that there's turmoil, political turmoil, geopolitical turmoil, and that the Jewish temple might suffer a destruction. I think it's kind of funny that that's the assumption, that these things weren't written until after 70 AD because the Jewish temple was destroyed in 70 AD, give or take. I think it's a really weird argument that happens in scholarship. I'm not really sure why that happened, because you could probably predict that it was going to happen in 68 AD or 65 AD, just knowing the geopolitics of the situation. That doesn't take any magic. That's just like any normal geopoliticist would have been like, yeah, I wouldn't be surprised if this whole thing gets swept away. And then, that doesn't take any gifts or supernatural, and it completely ignores the supernatural claim. So if there is supernatural ability to predict, then they could very easily have done that in 50 AD or 30 AD or 20 AD. I don't understand why that leap is made. It's a really weird leap in scholarship. But anyway.
Well, yeah. People want to judge. They're just looking for a loophole. They're looking for an out. Right. This is the type of thing, right? And Jewish scholars did this for a long time. Jews still do this. Is how to look at something so close, right? How to obey a law so close you don't obey it at all. It's kind of like when you play D&D. You're looking for loopholes or ways around stuff that destroy the whole spirit of the game. You're looking for a way to break the game. Absolutely. And that's what Christ said, right? That's why he just said, look, there are two commandments. Love God with all your heart, mind, and strength, and love your neighbor as yourself, right? And if you can do those, the spirit of those, and not try to look for loopholes, and not try to say well, I didn't get a good enough sign, so that's why I didn't. Right. That's why I wasn't nice to my fellow man. That's why I didn't value their rights or their humanity. That's not going to wash, right? Sure. Obviously, it's better if we do it for love of God. But our culture has definitely the second commandment, our treatment and our opinion that our fellow men, even the least of these, have value, need to have dignity before the court, need to not be oppressed, that the government's not just for the elites, it's for the common man, right? Is important that the common man vote matters just as much, especially those that live in a swing state like North Carolina.
Let's go.
Our vote matters a little bit more, but this is the government of the people, by the people, not of the elites. We don't have kings. We don't have king caucuses. Now, the elites do, with their money, have a lot of influence. But we're here. We can see through their narratives. We can see through their spin. And then we can see if their worldview really is shaped by and it is shared by us, right? And that's why we can tell a fake Christian from a true Christian, right? Somebody whose church says, God damn America, right, is somebody who's going to have a very different worldview than somebody who's even, a sort of not an irregular attender like Trump. Now, I'm not here to attack it. I don't know anything about Trump's faith. He has not confessed anything to me. I'm privy to no knowledge specifically on that, but that he values and understands, appreciate the strength and the quality it has given to our culture and our nation by not being antagonistic to Christianity, certainly.
So yeah, N1 AFE. If you're in London, England, and you're talking about only 50% I guess is Christian is what you meant, but you're about to be 50% Muslim from my read pretty soon. It won't be long. Holy cow! But anyway, yeah, no, King Crazy. I think that I think you're right. I think you're correct that there is no perfect way to know that the reading of the text is accurate. I think there's a lot of scholarship on it. I think that you can be pretty darn close to sure. It will never be 100% sure, but you can be pretty close to sure. I mean, there's so many studies into the usage of the words in the original text, and what the usage was at the time, and how to make sure it's not anachronistic, and to make sure that it follows the culture, and to make I mean there's so many people, and I'm woefully out of my depth when it comes to that. I don't know Greek, I don't know Latin, I don't know. I took
We're
Latin
not
in high
elite.
school.
We're not
Yeah,
elite.
we're not elite, right? But anyway, guys, that's what we had for you. We do appreciate you watching today. Thank you so much for your interaction. And even if you all hated the fact that we are largely a Christian nation here, it's all right. I
And
think
it's an important part. Tocqueville said that too. It's an important part of our greatness. So
it
it's
is
not like we're not great in spite of our Christianity. We're
right.
great because we take our Christianity seriously here. It's not just tokenism.
Right. Yeah. It's interesting to look at the way that some of our, for example, like I think it was Eisenhower that decided to like finally put "In God We Trust" on coinage and stuff like that. But there were or on dollar bills maybe or something. But anyway, there are all these different like graphs that show the religiosity of America, and like the height of our power, I would say, came essentially like right after World War II. That was like when we were strongest in comparison to the rest of the world. And the graph like starts to slide down. By the way, our world stage power starts to slide down at exactly the same time. It's kind of an interesting coincidence. Now, I'm not saying that, coincidence is not causation, and it's not even necessary. Correlation is not causation, but
Well, yeah. Well, you can. That's a good comparison because Eisenhower, right? Yeah, he put like under God in the Pledge of Allegiance, things like that,
yeah,
was to compare against the mandated secular government of the Soviets, of the
right,
USSR, who
right.
who were antagonistic to things and wanted and the would you rather live in a free society that will free you let you choose religion, or one that bans religion and requires commands secular things? And we'll see, right? A more free society, a more prosperous society, um, a better culture is America over Russia, and I think that's objective, not really subjective. And that's why the USSR fell. But I think the common man understand that. That's sort of common sense, and we're just here to speak that. So when elites want to talk about secularization, don't be afraid to say that our Christianity is a thing that makes our culture strong, and we want leaders. We want people that speak to that, not that mock it like Gavin Newsom.
So I do want to address this last thing by King
Sure.
Crazy, because discussing, he discussed, marriage rights, the freedom to get married, and the freedom to, they start talking about still voting on who has control over their body, still voting on basic human rights. So a lot of these, what we discussed is a lot of these are rights that are assumed, but are not actual rights. They're not part of the right code. They're not part of the unalienable rights guaranteed by our Declaration of Independence. And so the key here, though, is that everyone has the right to life, liberty, and pursuit of property, unless doing so negatively and directly impacts the life, liberty, pursuit of property of another. Right. And so you're sitting there, you could say, right to bodily autonomy. I have the right to bodily autonomy, but I don't have the right to take my body and stab somebody. right? Because that affects somebody else's body. That's where this like argument over bodily autonomy comes in, right? It's the fact that you're negatively harming another is the problem, not the fact that you are using your own liberty. Your own liberty isn't the case, right? And the marriage argument, it's not about whether or not you can get married. It's about whether or not it's called a marriage. You can do the same act, right? It's just that the whole debate isn't about whether or not you can have a union with somebody else. It's not about whether or not you can sleep with somebody else. It's not about what you do. It's about what it's called, right? That's the only part of
semantics. We wanted to call it a civil union and
right. That's all it
reserve
is.
the term marriage for heterosexual marriages. But yeah.
But anyways, you guys are great. Thank you so much for all your interaction, for all your comments. They're fantastic, even if they don't agree with us. It's probably actually the most fun when they don't, because it gives us some back and forth. I love that kind of dialogue. For any of you guys who are interested in having a debate on this channel, I'd be delighted to discuss it. We'd be happy to go over these issues. Any of you pick the topic. I'm relatively conversant in all of the typical, conservative stuff. I would argue I'm more of a true conservative, so you won't find me holding all of the Republican stances, but most of the conservative ones, right? So if you have any questions, want to talk to us about it, I'd be happy to. Catch you guys next time on Common Mansplaining.
Keep it coming.
Keep it coming.